Welcome to our Wednesday Nametags Chat podcast. Today I'm with, and you know what? I was supposed to ask you this beforehand. I'm going to try, but correct me if I'm wrong. Monica, I get correctly. Bascio?
Bascio.
Bascio. Monica Bascio. I've only known Monica for like 25 years or something like that. I should be able to get her last name right, but I don't really find myself saying your last name very often. Monica's a two-time silver medalist in the Paralympics in hand cycling, five-time world champion. She competed in both hand cycling and in Nordic skiing, in sit skiing, which is, we will get into it. Nordic sit skiing is absolutely positively brutal. We want to talk about that a little bit. At least it's brutal for me. But part of, we often do this with the 4 S's of resilience, and Monica brings a part on the community side of things. Not only has she been an athlete, but she's become someone who is an advocate for the athletes. She's on the IPC, the International Paralympic Committee's Athlete Advisory Board. She is working with the IOC's Athlete Entourage, helping to empower athletes, helping to empower their people, helping to make their transition into work better. I often say that I joined a group that I didn't want to join, and I became an advocate for a group that I didn't want to join. I mean, you didn't want to have a spinal cord injury. I didn't want to have a spinal cord injury. Is that something that you think about? Do you think about that my life took this weird turn, and now suddenly I'm an advocate for a lot of people that I wouldn't have planned to be for?
Yeah, absolutely, actually. And I very much would like to forget my disability. And I think sport is something that allowed me to do that, getting in the ski and getting out on the trails or getting out on the bike. So now that I am an advocate, and honestly, really in how it marries into the current or new IPC strategy of really inclusivity, and certainly in the cultural change that we're seeing in the world today of, equity and human rights. And so it's kind of serendipity that way that I am an advocate for those things, although that was never my true motivation. It was really, for me to compete at my best physically and not think about my disability. And honestly, I still don't think about my disability, if I were at work or school or church or what have you, I don't.
You're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I often say that to people because people say, oh, it must be so hard to get around. I'm like, I don't encounter something on a daily basis that I can't do. I mean, very rarely do I? And I'd imagine it's the same thing for you. But in the beginning, was it different? I know for me, it was different. I mean, you came out of the hospital. Did you know anybody in a wheelchair, anybody with a disability? Did any of your friends know anybody?
You're making me think way back. Gosh, it's been a long time. 28 years. Yeah, something made me think about that. I was reading an article about resilience and grit, and how it was Eli Wolf, if you follow him on, So he put a New York Times article, and really how people with spinal cord injuries are resilient. And, thinking about my life, and I thought just about getting out of the hospital and how it was so weird and so strange, but yet, I popped right in, like, okay, well, this is how I do it. This is how I drive. This is how I am going to be at school, or, cooking dinner. And so it wasn't really insurmountable for me at all, actually, which is kind of an odd thing. And maybe that's not the case for other people.
It's interesting. So you were in California, right? You had your accident in California. Did you stay in the hospital in California as well? Skiing accident as well. So we have that in common.
Yeah, it was then known as Sierra Ski Ranch. Yeah, went skiing up for the day in South Lake Tahoe. Did my surgery at Washoe Medical Center. And then since I grew up in New Jersey and all my family was there, I was able to transfer my health insurance, and I did my rehab at Kessler in
Oh, you
Orange, New
did
Jersey.
Kessler. Okay. Which is
Yeah.
one of the big places, really. I mean, one of the go-to places. That's Christopher Reeve kind of made it a little bit more famous than you did, I guess, apparently. But
Yeah, you did. I tried.
I think you did. I'm sure you did a great job. He came in with a little bit more recognition than probably all of us combined. Really, is what it comes down to. So you did that at Kessler, and then did you go directly back to school, or you went back to school out in California, right?
I did, yeah. So I spent the summer with my living at my brother's house, which was most accessible, and there's some good stories there in the family of me, doing outpatient rehab, and my ortho had me wear the brace for, I think it was 6 months or 7 months or something, a long time. Yeah. So, and then I
And by
went back.
brace, you mean this is like a full turtle shell. This is a
It's a turtle
plastic
shell.
turtle shell with Velcro closures on each side that you can't bend over. You can't do anything in 6 months. And during the summertime too, that thing must have been
Yeah.
awful, just sweating in there.
Yeah. So, I think my body has muscle memory of what good posture is, right? Or it used to, but, yeah, so I did New Jersey for the summer and then went straight back to, California, and it was Santa Cruz. It was much more, physically accessible, in environment, and yeah, returned to school.
And so you were in school prior to that. Okay.
Yeah.
How was that? I know for me, it was almost like a parade kind of thing when I returned to school. It was this amazing experience where, there was a bit of me that worried when I go back, what are people going to think? And when I went back, everybody's like, this is so great that you're here. And it was sort of this celebration that just, it was like this groundswell that just kind of pushed me along. Was it a similar kind of thing for you, or?
It was just, again, it was really, unremarkable, frankly. It was, yeah, it was accessible. And I think back now, and I still use this analogy, that some teachers, and maybe you've had this experience in life, that there's those that are curious and ask about your disability and that's cool. How do you do this? How can I accommodate it? And then there's some that, sort of pretend it doesn't exist. And I find that that's been consistent in my last 28 years, how people, interpret the wheelchair. But yeah, it was great, actually. I loved it. It was super, my school is accessible. My teachers were I'm in occupational therapy. So
And were you in that before too?
I was on the pathway. I hadn't started my
Okay.
curriculum yet, but yeah, so you're in a cohort, so you're with the same people throughout the whole program. So it was very supportive. It was very positive. I didn't have any negative stigma with the disability, just, it's inconvenient, but yeah.
Right. Well, for me, I found that I ended up having to, I'd have the people ask me, well, do you need to push up this hill? Do you need me to hold the door for you? Do you want me to take your tray at dinner? That kind of stuff, which is some of what you get to have sort of the education, right? Of like, no, I'm good, or whatever. And that's where in some ways you become an advocate almost immediately, don't you? Where nobody knows.
Yeah, yeah, it's very much, and certainly within working in occupational therapy in a rehab setting, it's a social role model is sort of how I came into it, not choosing that, but I realized, that after several years, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say, yeah, open the door, I don't feel like my hands are full or what have you, but very much, I think you're a social role model when you're out there and, being independent and doing it. And it's normal. And, what are my choices? But I realized that's not the same for everybody. So.
Right. How did the sport thing come about? When did you went through school and focused on school, or when did you start riding? Because it was really cycling that was first, right?
Yes, it was. And I definitely focused on school. I think I started riding, I got a bike in Santa Cruz. It's great, you know, a lot of cycling. And my now husband, a big cyclist, and I had friends that were in the biking community. So did, you know, it was very much recreational, very much to stave off secondary, you know, illnesses that you're taught, you know, the fear of God, of, you know, don't skip your weight shifts or what have you, you know, wear your support socks. So I was very, you know, wanting to exercise, but not in a competitive way. So I just did the social group rides, rode with my husband, friends, and yeah, so.
Was he in school? No.
No, so.
Okay. Interesting. And so when did it become competitive?
Oh, 1998, I think. So I broke my back in 92, 98. I think there was an opportunity. It was really a lot of change, a lot of new growth in the Paralympic movement, but more closer to home, very much about cycling. And I just would go to races that people were just getting together and see how I did. And then I went to this international race in Blois, France. I remember it vividly. It was quite an experience. And
Quite an
yeah,
experience. What does that mean?
yeah, well, it was really a little bit of cowboy kind of style in the cycling team and the coaching, and it was yeah, certainly not as organized and structured as you would think of a national team is today. So that's what I meant by interesting. It was, yeah, but it was international, so I went, and you know, certainly people were there that I am still in touch with today. Actually, you know, lifelong friends. I'm sure you have that same experience. But yeah, so I was good at it. So I just kept going.
You kept going. And was it because you were good? Was it because it was fitness? What really pushed you to get into the sport? Why? Was it a social part, or?
Initially, it was fitness, very much so. I like that. I love the endurance. I love having that feeling of pushing, you know, your body to the limits. So that was very much, you know, what pushed me. But you know, since that first trip in Blois, there had been national races organized where you're seeing the same people, and it was very much social, and you become friends with them, and you know, you share your training and coordinate your trips on where you're going to ride and cycling trips, and so it very much became social, and I think that kept me going with it, you know.
It's a different world, right? I mean, you were talking about the pressure reliefs and these kinds of things, that you have that fear of God in some ways, of leaving the hospital, that I'm such a fragile being, and if I don't lift myself up every 15 minutes, my skin is going to deteriorate, and I'm going to spend months lying on my stomach waiting for it to heal, and it's never going to heal quite right, and all of these things. I mean, it's a different, but for me, it was when I got into sport, it was kind of like when I felt normal again too, that it was sort of normal people, and maybe it was, you know, it was biking on 3 wheels as opposed to biking on 2 wheels, but at the same time, it was still competition. And it was the same. That what was it that same kind of thing for you? Is that what you mean by the social part of it, or?
Yeah, I mean, well, social meaning, you know, you traveled and you hung out with the same people, and you would race, but then you'd go out to dinner, and you know, so that part, you know, that camaraderie part of it was maybe more prevalent than the competitive, but certainly, you know, given the years that I've competed, the competitiveness, you know, came out pretty quickly, you know, and it didn't deter the socialization, but that became more the driving force.
Were you always an athlete, like growing up?
No, just recreational softball in high school, and yeah.
When did Sadler's happen? So Sadler's Alaska Challenge, did that happen before the national team, or when did that happen in your whole thing? And you're going to have to describe this race to people because I don't think they're going to believe it.
Yeah, Sadler's is its own entity for sure. And those people that have done it can really appreciate it. Oh, some great stories back, I think it was concurrently, right? Again, back at the, after 1998, that first, team still in development, and they were trying to organize into more structure on the national level. So there was this US hand cycling circuit. So it was sort of concurrently. Then Sadler's was every summer. No, Sadler's is a furniture store in Anchorage. And I don't even know if they're still in existence. They were the biggest sponsor for many years, but it started as a wheelchair race, and it started as 9 days riding from Fairbanks to Anchorage.
And this used to be called the Midnight Sun Marathon. Right?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it was Midnight Sun. Yeah,
and
right.
So is that summer solstice? So it's the longest day of the year?
Well, up there, they're all long, those days. It was, honestly, such great memories from that. I did it 5 times. Oh my.
And hold on. So it was Fairbank to Anchorage. Is that what it was?
It was, but it's,
and how far is that?
I don't remember.
It's
less than 5. It's 450 miles, maybe.
Something like that. I thought I had 340 in my mind.
Okay.
And it's 9 days, right? So it was like.
Well, it started as 9 days. I never did it when it was 9 days. That was really hard. I was working at the time, and just to get that much time off and let me backtrack. So it's a whole experience. So it was 9 days, and you do it in a camper van. So you arrive in Anchorage, and you are all the participants are sorted up in pairs with a couple of staff people that each have their own RV. And RVing, I guess, is a verb in Alaska and in many parts of the country. But I was first exposed to this culture, so it was kind of a new thing for me. But yeah, so you drove up to Fairbanks, and then you started the race, and you would stop along the way. So let's say you did, 60, 80 miles a day. I can't remember the exact mileage, but you would do a distance day, and then you stayed in the RV, like in an RV park, and so parked in these gravel campsites, I guess. So like, I think I only did that my first year was in the RV, and then they switched to hotels, which I was much more comfortable with. It was definitely more my speed. The RV was hard because they're not accessible. So you're transferring, right? So you're gritty, you ride 80 miles in wind and rain and what have you, big wind. And then you
hills, right?
Yeah, sleep in an RV. And then you have to go to the shower, and you have to wheel through the gravel, and so there were just all sorts of built-in challenges there with that.
You did this and you won it 5 years. So I mean, it's super difficult, but at the same time, you kept coming back.
Yeah.
Race. What brought you back?
Well, Alaska's beautiful, and I really would absolutely recommend it for anyone, when they had the race, to do it, just to experience that, because you stop along the way, as I said, but you stop and you are sharing dinner with a community, what was the first one? Nenana, right? So the local people or local Lions Club would host a dinner. And so it's such a cultural experience that you're meeting these people and, eating. I think that was the first time I had moose in the stew that I didn't know about until after I ate it. And so it was super fun. And again, back to the social component, because these are people that I knew from racing prior, and then you are on this adventure together. So I might not be riding with Carlos, but you know, at the end of the day, we're sharing dinner, we're sharing drinks, we're doing the stories, and then getting ready for the next day. So it's very much about that aspect. For me, that's what kept me coming back.
Right. And going back to Alaska, one, it's wide open. I mean, it is, even though these are populated areas for Alaska, you're going through places where there's really not much of anybody. There's a ton of wildlife. There are bears, there are, you know,
Moose.
it's raining, there's super hilly. I've never done it. I've just heard the stories about this race, and it is, in my mind, it's the who's who of like the cool, tough people.
Tough. Yeah, there's some grit needed for sure.
You wake up every morning, okay, I'm ready to go. Here we go. Oh, it's raining, and it's a 45-mile-an-hour headwind the whole way.
Always.
And it's uphill the whole time. And you're like, all right, I am super excited to get, but it's that payoff at the end, the sort of everybody gets there and goes, what did you think when we got to mile 7 and all of a sudden it was a torrential downpour, and what did you do? You know, I mean, these are the stories that keep going, isn't it? Like you're sharing it with everybody.
Oh, definitely. It's very much a shared experience because you ride together. Yeah. So, you know, you're talking as you're riding and eating and drinking, and, you know, you get the views of the mountain, and it was an awesome experience. And honestly, the people who put it on, you know, you felt like a rock star when you came into these small towns. Everyone celebrated you, and it was super great.
Which is not the case in a lot of other races. Nobody really notices who you are oftentimes. And so you're totally celebrated as somebody cool. And I think they respect what you're doing. But you started as a cyclist and you competed in 3 Paralympics, right? 4 Paralympics. 4 Paralympics. You competed in 4 Paralympics, but you competed in cross-country skiing before you competed in hand cycling. Hand cycling was your first sport, but then you got into cross-country skiing. Was it because you decided at Sadler's that you were just flat out tough and you decided that cross-country skiing was the way to go?
Not at all. Not at all. No. So I moved from California, where, you know, my primary activity was cycling, and moved to Colorado and really wanted to have some sort of endurance exercise in the winter. And that's how I got exposed to cross-country skiing, actually, with Candace. Took me out for my very first time. Yeah.
Can you describe your cross-country ski? Because you are in a wheelchair, spinal cord injury. So how does someone with a spinal cord injury do cross-country skiing? There's no skating. There's no diagonal. How do you do it? What's going on? What does it look like?
So it's sit skiing is what we call it. So I have a simple bucket, similar to a monoski bucket, molded to me, mounted on a simple square frame, and, you know, my feet are tucked underneath me, not so much in a wheelchair racing position, more upright, and mounted on 2 regular cross-country skis, and the poles are cut down, and the motion is just pure double pulling.
A lot of pulling the whole time, just
a lot of trunk.
Pull. And I have done this a few times. I actually have one. It is enjoyable. I'm giving it a bit of a hard time, but that's probably because I'm really not that good at it. And I remember going out my first time, and I kind of pulled, and I'd raced wheelchairs, and so there was this hill, and I kind of hammered up this hill and went, okay, all right, good. Like in racing wheelchairs, then you get the payoff. And I got to the top and went, oh no,
like, you still have to pull.
I'm like, I'm going to die on this thing, because there's no shock. It's just these 2, I mean, it's almost like envision that you take like a cafeteria chair and mount it onto 2 skis is kind of what this thing felt like. and you can't turn. And I was in the tracks, and I felt like one of those, it's in Park City, so I felt like one of those runaway mining carts in the tracks, like trying to stay in the tracks and thinking that because they never go completely straight. They always have that little turn, and I'm thinking I'm going to end up upside down. How do you do that? How do you do the turns?
Yeah.
How do you do the downhills?
The $100,000 question. You'll get a different answer from every sit skier, however. So given your level of ability, so someone who's a double amp that can sit ski, they have the ability to just pop out of the track, and then they can really use their hip and their trunk to shift their weight. So, T12, pretty textbook. So I could fake it, so you're right, though. At the bottom of every hill, there's a 90-degree turn, it seems, right? So you used your weight, a lot of weight shifting, and you're poling. Yeah, so it's not exact science.
And we're talking about going downhill right now, and downhill, at least you have some gravity working for you. I actually did a little event at one point with Mark Mast, and he said, well, can you side slip? And I was like, yeah, like I've been snow skiing my whole life. I can side slip. I know how to do that. He said, well, that's what you do going around the turn. Like go in and just slide it around the turn. And I was like, okay, that works a little. And out of the track. This is out of the track, obviously. But then when you think about it, going downhill, okay, you do have that fear of I'm going to die, or I'm going to. I mean, I've had the fear, like at the Park City at the golf course, that I'm going to end up in the little lake, the little pond that's right there. It's sort of angling into the pond, and I'm going along. Okay, don't end up in the pond. Don't end up in the pond. Don't end up in the pond. But it's the turns going on the flat or going uphill that you're going along, and then you have to go up the hill, and it's almost like I stop pretty much to turn, and then I have to go uphill. I had all this momentum, and now I don't have any momentum at all. So to me, it's a brutal sport that you just have to be out in front of it the whole time and figuring out how to do it technically. It's so you competed in first games was Torino, right?
Yeah, 2006.
How was that? And you also did biathlon.
I did. In Torino, I did. But I had learned quickly that I should focus on one or the other, not. So biathlon's a tough sport for sure. I was good at shooting, but shooting and skiing, just out the back, and it was, humiliating. And I did much better in my cross-country race.
Describe biathlon, though, because a lot of people probably don't know. It's so popular in Europe, but we don't see that much of it here in the US. How does it work?
So, biathlon, so you ski and you shoot. And so you have a, what are they? The able body, they have a 20, what do they have? Can't remember.
Like what kind of?
Their gun, yeah. So
I don't know.
Yeah, so for the para, you don't carry your gun at all. So you'll do a loop, and then you come into the shooting range. The coach hands you your air rifle, and you shoot, and then you ski off.
Right, but so what is the distance? What's your heart rate coming into the shoot, and what's the objective? What do you have to shoot?
Yeah, so there's different distances. So, I think there's a sprint now, which is a 2.5K. So that's obviously quick, that you do a lap, you shoot, and another lap, and you're done.
So 1K lap, and then shoot, and then another 1K lap, and then.
Yeah, so that's obviously really short. And then,
but you're also going really fast.
Right, exactly. Right. And then there's a 5K and a 10, and I think that's now at 12K, so that you'll have different, you'll have more shooting opportunities as, the race increases. And then the longest distance you get instead of doing a penalty lap. So, sorry, let me back up. So if you're doing your lap and you get your 5 shots and you miss 3 of them, then you have to go into what's called the penalty loop. which is just a side of the shooting range. And, for every shot that you miss, you have to do a lap. So you're right there. Everyone sees you. You see your competitors going in or not. But in the distance race, you don't have the penalty loop, and you just get a time, deduction for each shot that you missed. So the goal is to shoot clean and ski fast and win the race.
Well, that sounds like a great goal. And it's
Yes.
super easy right now as we're sitting here comfortably in our homes without having our heart rate at 180 or 200 or whatever you're coming into this, and then trying to concentrate, trying to master your breathing. I mean, this is where it's a really cool sport in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, very much so. And so you can really have a lot of appreciation to see, people who are successful at it. And it's not, maybe some people might think that you're trying to reduce your breathing, but it's really about shooting in between your breaths. So it's more of controlling your heart rate and your breathing.
Right, which makes it really hard. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But these are fit people, they can handle it. They're,
that's where it's really exciting to watch it. But to do it, I did it once, and it was kind of funny. I just did it with that same thing that I did with Mark Mast, where it was over at Soldier Hollow, and it was just around, like, it was probably maybe 400 meters or something like that, maybe like the size of a track. And it was with a bunch of veterans. They were doing some veteran, learn to cross country ski kind of thing. And the funny part for me was that they were all so locked in, right? These are all veterans who are coming in, and they're just talking about their guns, and it's like, oh, well, this one's high right, this one's, and I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Like,
they like to shoot.
To get close, just to, and it was kind of funny, but it was fun to see that. And then obviously for you in a sit ski, you're shooting prone, right? So you tip over, and then you're shooting while still with your legs in the ski and trying to find the best position.
Yeah, that's hard. And that, just definitely highlights the discrepancy in the classification, because, prone, right? You have a tripod with your elbows, and then your hips are equally against the ground. But so like a double amp might be able to do that. And I think they are able to, get their hips to the ground. So I couldn't do that. So the higher level disabilities, you're really twisted. You're in a horribly uncomfortable position. You can't get both elbows on the ground, and so you got to get it over with as quickly as possible.
You hope that you hit most of them and be ready to go
and move on. Yeah,
if you have to.
Yeah.
And we're talking so much about biathlon, which you really didn't even focus on biathlon. What were your events in cross country? You were more of a distance person than you were a sprinter, right?
Yeah, that was always the case. So yeah, it was, it used to be the 2.5, a 5, and a 10. So now the 2.5, that's what I did. And then Sochi, they got rid of the 2.5 short, and then they have a sprint, which is anywhere from 700 to 1,000, a K course. So that was fast. I think they kept it the 5K, and now the distance is 12K. So those are the 3 cross country races. And yeah, I definitely much prefer the distance races. And I always have, I think it's also behooved me with age, right? The distance comes, but yeah, even when I first started, I definitely preferred the longer races.
Did you really? See, I don't really understand that.
Oh, because you get going. You weed it out. Yeah. Attrition,
well, that's what happened to me. I got weeded out.
Oh, sorry.
You guys go have fun. Have a good race. I'm going to stay here.
Yeah. So go with your strengths, right?
Exactly. So you did 2 cross country before you did a summer games, right? So 2 winter games. You did both Torino and Vancouver. And so then was it a relief for you to actually get back into the hand cycling? I mean, hand cycling seems like it was really the thing you gravitated toward, right?
Yeah, it's definitely my love for sure. It was exciting, not really a relief. I was excited that I had an opportunity to fit into a classification that, you know, would be represented at London, and you know, all the hoopla around London, you know, that was a thrill. So I think it was 2011 I started with the national team. And I did well, right? This is my sport and I love it, right? I think we all know when you love it, you're just that much more prone to success. So yeah, I was riding high, winning, and yeah, in London, yeah, I got some medals in London. That was
And kind of funny too, on the hand cycling side, on the female hand cycling side too, because you're then coming from the winter to hand cycling from Nordic, but then Muffy Davis was coming from Alpine to
right.
hand cycling as well. And were you guys in the same class, or were you in different classes, or how did that work?
She's in a different class than I am, but so like the time trial would be separate, and then we'd race together in a road race. So depending, like the World Cup, we each had our own medal opportunity, but at the games they were combined because they have to consolidate for medal events. So
Okay, so then you had 2 silvers there, and so the 2 of you were on the podium together
for the road race,
for
yeah,
the road race. Okay.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So she and I are very different in our style. So her alpine skiing really, so she's a great bike handler, right? No fear. She could take the, you know, the sketchy line and pull it off. And, you know, that it's not my strength, but my strength is very much the endurance, the hills, you know, and I could, you know, just zip up hills. And so I think one of the coaches called me the Diesel, and she was the Ferrari, or I can't remember the, you know, she's a sprinter. She's, you know, power for sure. But yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. How did that work out, like at training camps? Did you, because you would go to training camps together, would you end up being together, or was it one of those that it was like the tortoise and the hare kind of thing where you guys might meet
No,
at
I mean, it wasn't that, you know,
not that pronounced?
the disparity wasn't that pronounced at all. Yeah. And in training camps, right, you're training, right? So you're either doing long rides or short rides or practicing your sprints or whatever your efforts are. So yeah, I don't remember it being an issue at training camps at all. But yeah, but you know, I knew, you know, you don't want to leave it to a sprint with Muffy. She's going to pull it out. Right. Yeah.
Which is again one of those things that's really easy, similar to the biathlon, that it's easy to say, well, don't leave it to a sprint. And it's like, okay, if I don't leave it to a sprint, that means that I have to go out really hard at some point prior to the sprint to take the sprint out of her. So you're out there on your own, just grinding it out, just hoping that you pick the right time too, right?
Right. It's strategic. And then knowing, you know, it's an individual sport, but you really need to know, right? You have to be a smart racer in a road race. Yeah.
Right. Were you ever jealous of those sprinters, like watching like the tour and stuff like that? I mean, like the sprinters get some of that glory, but then if you have a breakaway, you're on your own and you get all the glory. So
Yeah. No, I never, jealousy never was what came to mind. It was just, for me, it was just something, it was good to have an area to work on. And, you know, I absolutely improved my sprinting and my power, you know, from when I started. I could spin forever, super high cadence, go forever. And so really working on your weaknesses, right? That's what it all is, right? So pushing bigger gears for longer times, harder, yeah, power.
which is also part of competition too, because if you're just out there on the bike path or on the beach or whatever you are over in California, you're just doing what you do. And then
Right.
all of a sudden you get into a race and go, oh, there's something else I need to add to my bag of tricks here in order to really be
Exactly.
successful.
Yeah.
And so you went through that, and then in 2013, 2013, that was kind of the end for you, right? But you were super successful at the World Championships, right?
Yeah, that was a great year. I won everything that year, which I think is why I was nominated for Sportswoman of the Year. Yeah, I did, and I loved it, and it was
Was
great.
that a
But
surprise, or was that not, or was that what you
that I
thought?
won.
Yeah. Did you think that going in that you were in position to win?
I just was really in tune to my fitness, and I just maximized my training. And yeah, I think as veteran athletes, you really know your peaking style and your diet and the mental game and how to play that game a little bit better. And I think I was just really aligned and really in tune, and it felt good. It felt easy, and yeah,
You
I
were
wish I could get
prepared.
back there.
Exactly. Well, that's always, there's a lot of work that goes into
To
being
get
that
there.
prepared, and it doesn't last. It takes a lot of building to get there, and you can lose it really quickly. What was your typical training like? Can you tell people what you had to do? Like, what's a week for you, like a typical week kind of thing?
For cycling?
For cycling, sure.
Yeah. Well, I rode my bike a lot, and I've been thinking I still ride, and now I'm very much mentally, on the beach, and I like the trees and the scenery, and that's why I love it. So I think about, what was that so different? And it's not that I did so many hours, and initially early season, you do a lot of hours, right? Maybe 15-hour weeks. And then you tail back, but you really want more quality and really more efforts, more power, intervals, and being able to sustain those power longer. And really, what you see at like the Tour de France, these professional riders are the ability to, press and come off and press again, right? And
Press and come off, like put in a surge and then be able to surge again, kind of thing.
right.
Right.
So you can
Which
go
is
full
amazing to
gas and
recover. Yeah.
recover. Right, exactly. So having your body being able to be ready for that. So the training was a lot of intervals. So maybe I would ride, a typical day would be 90 minutes, 2 hours, but I would have a 30 minutes of interval sessions that I would do, maybe a long ride on Saturday. But
And were you based on speed? Were you based on power? How were you gauging your training?
yeah, time and power. Yeah,
Time and power.
yeah,
Okay.
not distance.
Right. And so power is based on a power meter. So it's a device that is on your chain ring effectively, that determines how much power you are putting into the pedals to make them go further. And that's become the more of the scientific way of training and staying within this zone and within that zone, and when you're going fast. And then it's kind of funny, because when you look at that, it does become scientific, right? It seemed like
Very.
when we were younger, it was about heart. It was about like, well, it's going to hurt for everybody. You just have to press through it, and you just have to go
Get up.
harder.
Yeah.
And this, you have actually like empirical numbers that are saying, this data says this is where you are, this is what you're doing. And did it ever, what, I have not had much experience with the powder meter, but did it get to that point where you could kind of give yourself a break, where you're saying, oh, I didn't quit. It was just, I reached my threshold, I reached my max, and that's what I can do. Could you reconcile that, or how did that work?
I think that is an issue for some athletes. For me, I very much was about the feel, very intuitive. And so I am not one that would, in training, I would very much follow my power meter and my numbers, and you got to stay within your range for a certain amount of time, back off and do it again. But in a race, I didn't look at my power meter at all. It was really and all that work leads up to, having the confidence and knowing your body and knowing what you can do, and going by feel. So, Yeah, no, it is. And honestly, it's way even more scientific now than there's, wireless shifting, which I didn't have when I was racing. And, uh, and coming from cross country where you don't have power, you don't have any measurable output at all. And it's intuitive, right? That's only it. But how do you know when you're making progress,
Right. So it was intuitive. So would you look at anything when you race? Would you look at speed? Would you look at, was there any input that you said, wow, we're going much faster right now than I thought we should, or than I usually go, or something? Did you have any of that input that, I'm in trouble?
Maybe I would, like in a time trial. In a road race, it's so different because you're with other people. And so you're really playing that game more than, numbers. But a time trial, if it's an out and back, maybe at the turnaround, for me, I always had a goal. I need to be at, this time at this mile, something like that. But, so I would allow myself, okay, when I get to halfway or last 5K, you can look at your meter, see if you're on, but in a race, hopefully you have a coach telling you, step
that
it
was
up.
going to be my next question, right? Because you get that, like in the Tour, these guys have the coach in their ear the whole time. And it's kind of, in some ways, it seems like it can be helpful. And in other ways, it seems like it can be completely detrimental. Like, I mean, we saw like the second to last stage of the Tour de France this year. I don't know if you watched it, but like
The time trial.
the time trial, the uphill time trial, and he's going through that uphill time trial. And it's like, you don't want to get those splits. You don't want to know where you are, because it looked like it just got more and more disheartening for him as he was going, and he ended up losing a lot of time.
Yeah. So it could be. And again, it's like your mental preparation. And I know here in the US, we have sports psychologists and, on the trips that are working with you at the camps and along the way. And what's your deal? What's your hang up? Is it negative chatter? Is it I get distracted? I miss the turn, So you really, it's about knowing yourself and knowing your strengths and the weaknesses that you might be prone to and working on that. The mental game cannot be underestimated. I really have learned that. So
In every sport.
Totally. It can make and break it. Absolutely. Yeah.
We spend so much time on the physical side of it and so much less on the mental side that ultimately determines your success. But, and it is changing now. There's more opportunity. There are more opportunities there. How did it work? So, I mean, you went through some serious stuff. I mean, you were Sportswoman of the Year, and then you went to Sochi and competed in Sochi.
Yes. 14. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And then you had stage 3 colon cancer after you came back from Sochi. So this is like, from the very high down to the very low as you're concluding your career. So what happens? What kind of state of mind? What do you, because it's always hard to finish your career, isn't it? I mean, you finish your career, but if you finish your career because you're sick, or if you get sick after you decide you're going to finish your career, it makes it much harder to figure out what you're going to do next. What was going on in your mind, and what kind of a plan did you come up with?
I wish I had a plan, actually. It's sort of life gives you your plan, right? So I knew I was, done after Sochi. And then, so I was diagnosed in September, right after that. But we had just moved and I just, left sport. And so, like you say, all those transitional support systems were not there. So I wasn't at my work, and now it was really about just how do I manage cancer, and what do I have to do? So not dissimilar to when I broke my back, and it started out easier than it finished, as I think it is for most chemo treatments. But yeah, so I had surgery and I had a bowel resection, and that was successful, and that went well. And I had to do 12 weeks every other week of treatment that, does get, subsequently worse, a lot worse. So like by March, I was pretty spent. Yeah. But
do you end up learning? Like I look back on the time after my accident as probably the most powerful that I ever was in my life, and part of it was this sense of recovery, that the recovery is really the only focus, and how can I direct all of that energy into that. You went through that same kind of thing. At the end of your career, is there something that you ended up taking away from that journey, that cancer journey? Because you've talked numerous times about grit. You keep mentioning grit. I'd imagine that grit was a part of that. But did you take anything from that cancer journey to the rest of your life, or something that's a reminder today?
gosh, I think I still am trying to decipher that lesson, but very much, life is precious in the moment. And I have a young child, and it was really about surviving. And so I really am very much interested in the grit. And Angela Duckworth does a lot of work in the educational system about grit and resilience. And I'm fascinated by it, because some people have it, some people don't. Some people can learn it, and how that helps you be resilient and move on. So for me, it was sort of a chance to stop, breathe. What's next? What's next in your pathway for life beyond sport? So it was sort of an opportunity, I guess you could say, in a way.
A little change in your perspective. And you mentioned that you have a son, Henry, who's now in 8th grade, you said?
Yeah.
8th grade.
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Right?
I know. I'm probably more astonishing for you than it is for me, but I don't see him all
Yeah.
that often, and I don't. But
Yeah.
what's the story that you tell him? Does your experience change the way that you tell your story to him, or that you're trying to help educate him?
I don't know that it's changed, and I think it's true for overcoming illness, but as well as sport, and that drive and focus is you have to try, and nothing ventured, nothing gained sort of perspective, that the bare minimum is not enough. You have to keep trying. You have to find opportunities and not obstacles. And I think I say that every day, and I get the eye roll, but I feel like it's very true and very applicable because I've lived it, and so I spare him the lecture of, when I had to do this, but really pointing out through sport or through illness that it doesn't happen without intervention. I believe
Without intervention, what do you mean?
like when you, for sport, you do the training and you train hard because you want to be the best. If you train mediocre level, then you'll be a mediocre athlete. But for illness, right, you have to actively participate in the recovery process and help yourself, eat the right foods, get out and exercise, and if it's a mental thing. So, because it got kind of dark for me, like, where am I going? What now? And really persevering and try harder. Yeah, just continually trying to be better. And yeah, that's my lesson for him a lot.
The grit was part of what made you successful as an athlete as well, right? That you felt like you were willing to. Is there, when things get difficult, is there a story that you tell yourself? Is there a reason why you're doing what you're doing, and that helps you power through that?
Oh, definitely. And it's very much about the outcome, that I can overcome it. I'm not going to be a victim. And, so it depends on the situation, of course, if it's sport or career, and how I'm very goal oriented. So how can I get there? So I think that is, the story that I tell myself is for some reason, oddly enough, I've always had confidence. I believe in myself that I can overcome cancer, or I can win this race, or I can, whatever, find a new career, or whatever it is. And I believe that. I believe that deeply. And that's the story that I tell myself.
And so there's a way to be successful, and you're going to figure out what that way is. And that's when things, because it's so easy, right, to be the armchair quarterback kind of thing and go, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. And it's like, yeah, when everything is calm and nice and comfortable, it's easy to make the decisions, but when you're stressed and when you're pushed to that very limit, that's when you have to make those decisions. And it sounds like for you, that's when it clicks in of like, oh, now it's real. Now it's real, and I have to make that decision. How has that helped you with some of what you're doing now to be an advocate and helping athletes in terms of careers, in terms of their visibility, in terms of a variety of different things?
As an OT, we used to do this exercise. So I worked in mental health for a bit in Santa Cruz, and it was about how, what shapes your view or what drives your actions in life as a person. And it's really about your values. And so certain people have different values, whether it's financial or friends or, religious or however. And for me, and I've known this for a while, is it's very much about a justice. I value that very, and not so much being a rule follower.
About justice.
Yeah, having justice, having things be right and just. And if they're not, then what can I do to improve that situation? So that, I think, very much drives my role as an athlete advocate, and what's the right thing to do, And I know that sounds so trite and simplistic, but, right now, given the aftermath of gymnastics and, some of these stories that we hear, and, it's how can athletes be heard and respected? And that's the right thing to do. And I got into athlete advocacy, after I retired, and in 2016, I was elected in Rio for the IPC Athlete Council. But I've learned so much, and really more so now value the justification of why that needs to exist and why there does need to be athlete advocacy. And, if it's advocacy, for me, it's athlete advocacy, but it, obviously there's people that exist in the same role for healthcare or, Black Lives Matter, then that justice drives me.
You are an athlete. That's the, it's part of who you were. It's part of who you are in your heart. And so you want to find justice on that level. And so it's helping athletes to it's helping athletes in their performance, but it's also in a lot of ways, you've been involved in Paralympic sport, right? And we've seen a gigantic transformation in Paralympic sport. My first games was 1992 in Albertville. We had an opening ceremony. So it was not in a stadium. It was basically just all of the teams, and they had these paragliders that would come down with every flag on it, with each individual flag. And that's kind of when you'd come up, and it was a cool ceremony, but it was totally different than what we're used to now on the Paralympic side, which is very similar to what happens on the Olympic side. And I signed some autographs, and I signed a bunch of autographs in crayon for the children from the schools who are pretty much our fans. If it wasn't a friend or family, it was really some first grade class that came up to watch the Paralympics. And gone from that to, you were in London where people were waking up in the middle of the night to get into a lottery to try to get tickets to see the games in London. It's progressed so much. It's on television, much more. And there's still a ways to go as well, right? We see a lot. NBC here keeps improving the amount of coverage, but it's not quite exactly the same as the Olympics. Is that some of what you're looking for? Is that same kind of justice and equality, or is it also justice and equality as far as the opportunity afterwards?
Uh, Probably more the latter for me. I mean, yeah, the whole coverage that, I think that's a common question that I get around the world, more from US athletes, to be honest, about having more exposure and having my sport highlighted. So for me, and certainly in the role, it doesn't happen overnight. You're not going to all of a sudden be, superseding the Super Bowl or what have you, right? But you just have to be the voice and keep speaking up for what you believe is right. And so it's every day, right? And I love the expression for the games, the Olympics, it's every day. It's not every 4 years, right? Because you're doing the training, you're doing the work, you're doing the prep work. So as far as that awareness, it globally, yeah, it happens. You have to work at it every day. And whether that's educating your school or, the alumni is a great, useful tool for that, to share the history of, what it was like in 92 and the progress that has been made and where we want that to go. And that's, I think, why it's so important to be an athlete advocate in the world of sports, because you can't lose that voice and that push for direction, certainly in the para space.
It's funny, you mentioned something that was really interesting there. You've definitely had a lot of success. I mean, a couple of silver medals and 5 world championship gold medals. And so you've been really successful, but you also said that it's the everyday. When you look back on your career now, do you look back on the days that you were most successful? Do you look back on those days, just the showing up every day and doing your training, or potentially those transformational days where something went wrong and you had to figure it out? Which days do you look back on?
Yeah, so I rode out, I lived outside of Denver, and so I think of the everyday. I think of my bike routes that I would do, or the time trial series down at Cherry Creek, and my best time. I can still tell you my best time at Cherry Creek, and so I like thinking of those building blocks. Certainly London was wow, right? And I can think of that and feel that joy, this moment. But it's, for me, it's those every day. It's that, when am I going to work out? How am I going to, cover my childcare, or how am I going to, do my intervals, or, and very much focused on that, breaking it down.
Well, it's a lifestyle, because I had somebody at one point who asked me, what do you miss? And I think that the assumption is that you miss the glamour. You miss the being on television. You miss the being on the podium. And I said to her, I was like, I miss the two-a-days.
The training.
And she
Yeah.
like, I was crazy. And I was like, no, that's when the transformation happens. That's when you can dream. That's when you're most excited about what you're doing. And for me, it was probably similar to you. Well, you were probably more fit coming out of Nordic season, going into biking season. But for me, coming out of alpine skiing season and going into wheelchair racing season, it was like, okay, what can I do to try to get into shape relatively quickly right now? But that's where you're thinking, I'm seeing some gains. And the gains are the things that are really more intoxicating than any medal, aren't they?
Definitely. Yeah. And the exhaustion, like sleeping, like I know right now there's several sleep studies out that are quite popular, and, always been a great sleeper. Like I was all, I brag about how many hours I get, not, some people, oh, I only sleep 4 hours. I always think how horrible, do they not use their body physically to demand more sleep? I don't know. But yeah, I definitely miss that.
Is that part of a message that you communicate now? I mean, do you get an opportunity to tell people that, no, this is the important part, or even with Henry, right? The important part is the work that you're doing and being exhausted at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's that cycle of, you have to work hard and then you recover. And that's how you progress. I think that's true, in athletics and overcoming illness, right? Or working at a job, right? You do the work and then you recover and then you do a little bit better the next day. So I think that's the human condition.
You're a goal-oriented person. What are the goals right now? I'm sure you have goals. What are your goals?
Yeah, so I got into a master's program, the MBA program, through the wonderful USOPC partnerships that they have with online school in DeVry. So I'm finishing that up and staying with health administration. So my goal is to return to OT, work with health administration to be more of a management position or be able to flex from patient care to administration in public health.
Awesome. And how much time do you have left in your MBA program?
So I have one more 8-week session, but yeah, so I could go, I've kept up with my OT stuff, so I can work PRN, but I have to say that I'm, again, back to my goal. Like, I'm all about my schoolwork, and yeah, so I'm pretty focused on that. So I haven't been working. So I'm really wanting to finish my schoolwork and take care of my family.
You've been a full-time student.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And moving in, this is absolutely awesome. Thank you, Monica, for joining us. We're excited to follow you and see what you're going to do next, but also thank you for all the work that you're doing for athletes. And it is a single-minded focus. I mean, in a lot of ways, being an athlete is probably the most selfish thing that you can do. That
I agree.
Sleep, eat, train, everything is all focused on one thing. And sometimes the idea of the future gets missed. And so it's great for people like you to help the athletes to have a better plan as they're moving along and as they're moving into whatever is going to be next, without really having an idea oftentimes of what's going to be next. And so giving them that opportunity. That is wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for, well, I guess it's not quite dinner time yet, right? No, so this is, we'll get you out for dinner time. So thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you sometime relatively soon. And thank you all for joining us for another episode here of the Nametags Chat podcast. You can watch it tomorrow. If you only saw parts of it, you can go and it'll actually be archived on the One Revolution page on Facebook. So you can go to the One Revolution page. You can go and check it out. Monica, you can go and check it out and see how I did. Or you can go and watch it on YouTube. It'll take a little while for this to get uploaded onto YouTube, but we will upload it onto YouTube. And again, it's on the One Revolution channel. So thank you, Monica, for joining us. And
thank you for doing it. I appreciate you inviting me and being able to share my story and my goals. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you all. Take care.